Dirt Rider's 2023 250 Four-Stroke Motocross Shootout was an exciting one, with the KTM 250S XF and Husqvarna FC 250 featuring all new platforms, and the Kawasaki KX250 receiving engine, suspension, and chassis updates. Except for different radiator shroud graphics, the Honda CRF250R, Yamaha YZ250F, and GasGas MC 250F entered the comparison identical to last year. Before taking the bikes to the track, we measured seat heights, applied DeCal Works pre-printed number plate backgrounds, and mounted fresh Dunlop Geomax MX33 tires to keep traction consistent across the board. After several days of testing, here's how the bikes stacked up. Finishing in 6th place is the Honda CRF250R. On our in-house dyno, it makes 37.8 horsepower and 18 pound-feet of torque, ranking it 6th in peak horsepower and ties for 6th in maximum torque. On the track, the Honda engine is impressive with the second best bottom end power and a strong mid-range. Top end is decent but lacks compared to the competition, especially above 11,500 RPM. Big Red's cable actuated clutch has the hardest lever pull and fades noticeably when it heats up. Suspension-wise, the CRF250R is one of the most difficult to set up. Its Showa 49mm coil spring fork and Showa shock are all about performance, offering very little comfort in low speed bumps, but do a fine job of absorbing larger impacts such as jump landings. Although harsh at times, the components don't deflect off square edge bumps. There is a window of adjustability, but it's small. Finding an ideal setting requires tuning and patience. At 231 pounds wet on Dirt Rider's automotive scales, the CRF250R ties for lightest in the class. It's the sharpest handling machine and is very responsive to rider input, making it easy to lean and grab inside lines at a moment's notice. There's a price to pay for such nimbleness though, as the Honda's chassis is the most rigid of those gathered here. Stability is better than expected for a bike with such great cornering ability, but it's not as predictable as the competition in fast, rough sections of track. Ergonomics are some of the best except for a firm and uncomfortable seat. More horsepower and torque above 8,000 RPM, a plusher suspension setup, and less chassis rigidity are what the Honda needs to better its standing in next year's comparison. Grabbing 5th place is the Kawasaki KX250. On the Dirt Rider dyno, it produces 40.9 horsepower and 18.9 pound-feet of torque. With those figures, the green machine sits 3rd in peak horsepower and 4th in maximum torque. The KX250 engine works great for those who like to rev, but the meat of its power is too high in the RPM range for beginner and novice level riders. Reaching that abundant top end power takes some time as well because it has the softest bottom end in the class. The Kawasaki's power band is the most 125 two-stroke like, rewarding those who turn the throttle to the stop and keep it there, but it takes some time to build RPM after mistakes are made or the wrong gear is chosen. Feathering the Nissan hydraulic clutch is easy thanks to its smooth pull. Kawasaki specs its quarter-liter four-stroke motocrosser with a KYB 48mm coil spring fork and KYB shock, which have the potential to be the best suspension in the class. However, they are set up too stiff for most in stock trim. Riders who weigh 175 pounds or more will appreciate the holdup, but those who weigh less than that will likely need softer springs or a revalve. The performance-oriented setting soaks up large, high-speed hits well, but lacks comfort in small chop. The KX250 suspension works alright on tighter, jumpier courses, but on a rough track like Glen Helen, it becomes all too apparent that Team Green missed the mark on setup. The KX250 is heaviest in the class, hitting our automotive scales at 239 pounds wet. Despite that, it feels light and nimble on the track. Handling is mostly neutral, but an insufficient amount of weight on the front end hinders cornering capability. Ergonomics are superb with narrow bodywork and a flat seat. The Renthal Fat Bar 839 bend handlebar being a touch high throws off the rider triangle just slightly, but it's just about perfect otherwise. More low end grunt, a softer suspension setting, and replacing EFI couplers with a handlebar mounted engine map select button would help the KX250 move closer to the front of the pack. Slotting into 4th place is the GasGas MC 250F. The red Austrian machine churns out 40.3 horsepower and 19.2 pound-feet of torque, which puts it 4th in peak horsepower and 3rd in maximum torque. Dyno results also revealed it makes the least horsepower and torque of all the bikes from 3,400 RPM to 5,800 RPM. That lack of low RPM power is evident in the dirt as the GasGas has stronger bottom end than the Kawasaki, but less than the others. Power delivery is mellow and smooth with tons of top end and over rev. The GasGas is also the only bike in its class to not have any sort of EFI tunability in stock trim. Its WP Exact 48mm air fork and WP Exact shock are spec'd with a soft setting and offer a very plush feel, but are spongy and springy, especially the shock. The components work great on acceleration, but need to be stiffer for braking. The fork offers less bottoming resistance than the other two Austrian machines, but more comfort deeper in the stroke. Aside from a lack of holdup, this is one of the better stock suspension settings in the class. For the second year in a row, both red bikes in this comparison are lightest of the bunch at 231 pounds wet on the Dirt Rider scales. That's just one aspect that makes the GasGas such a well-rounded package. It has a good balance of just about everything, with a noticeable amount of chassis comfort thanks to its chromoly steel frame and forged triple clamps. Handling leans slightly more towards stability, but it carves corners very well too. Seat comfort not being on par with the KTM and Husqvarna is our only criticism of the GasGas's ergonomics. The MC250F is enjoyable to ride, but it could use stronger bottom end power, firmer suspension, and a map switch to make it a better race bike in stock trim. Rounding out the podium is the Husqvarna FC250. With 41.7 horsepower and 19.3 pound-feet of torque, it produces the most peak horsepower and is runner-up in maximum torque. Boasting improved mid-range over previous models, the FC250's power is very usable. It doesn't rev as quickly or pull as long as the prior generation engine, but still offers some of the best high RPM power in the class. Low end is a bit lackluster, but is improved by selecting the more aggressive map 2. In addition to being one of the best shifting motorcycles in this segment, the Husqvarna and KTM now feature a quick shifter that allows for clutchless upshifting. It's beneficial for starts and long straightaways, but has a slight delay and takes some getting used to. One of the qualities that sets Husqvarna apart from the KTM is its 10mm lower suspension setup. The WP Exact 48mm air fork and WP Exact shock feel plush when hitting small bumps, but don't offer as much comfort in rougher terrain because of a tendency to ride in a firmer part of the stroke. A new hydro stop in the fork gives it better bottoming resistance than ever, but almost works too well as it doesn't allow for all of the stroke to be used, which is especially noticeable on the FC250 because it offers the least front suspension travel in the class. Tool-free shock damping adjusters are a nice touch, but the plastic piece that covers the shock body makes the low and high-speed compression more difficult to access than the KTM's. According to our scales, the Husqvarna gained 4 pounds over last year's model for a wet weight of 236 pounds. Despite its weight gain and heavier feeling engine character, the FC250 is still one of the most nimble, excels in turns, partially due to its lower stance, and is predictable at speed. The cockpit is comfortable, and adding to that is its pro taper handlebar flexes more than the neck end spec'd on the KTM and GasGas. Husqvarna's FC250 is best suited for those who are 5'9" and shorter and weigh 150 pounds or less. Riders taller and heavier than that can appreciate it as well, but the other Austrian machine with a nearly identical platform suits a wider range of people. Taking the runner-up spot is the KTM 250 SXF. Spinning the drum on our in-house dyno, it makes 41.5 horsepower and 19.5 pound-feet of torque, placing it second in peak horsepower and first in maximum torque. Mid-range is better than ever, but at the cost of some over-rev. Still, the KTM remains a class leader in top-end power, as evidenced by its impressive dyno numbers. Bottom end is average, and there's still some engine vibration felt in the handlebar and foot pegs. The Brembo hydraulic clutch on the KTM, Husqvarna, and GasGas works flawlessly and is best of the bunch. A competition-focused setup of its WP Exact 48mm air fork and WP Exact shock give the KTM one of the best suspension packages in the class. It's the firmest setting of the Austrian trio and offers more comfort than the Honda and Kawasaki suspension, but isn't as plush as the Yamaha's. Riders can attack the track with confidence knowing the WP components will hold up, but the fork rides high in the stroke and goes through it too quickly at times. Like the Husqvarna, its fork hydro stop is too effective at preventing bottoming and limits the amount of usable travel. The shock doesn't compress as much under acceleration compared to the prior generation model, and the ability to adjust its damping by hand is yet another industry first for KTM. Hitting the Dirt Rider scales at 237 pounds wet, the orange bike weighs 5 pounds more than it did last year and is now second heaviest in the class. Stability has improved on this new generation model while retaining ample cornering ability, but there is less front-end traction than before. Ergonomics are excellent with a narrow midsection, well-proportioned rider triangle, and comfortable seat. Brembo continues to set the benchmark for dirt bike brakes, which are standard equipment on the 3 Austrian machines. Additional low-end power, more consistent fork action, and a plusher suspension feel are what the KTM needs to win this comparison in the future. Capturing the victory in Dirt Rider's 2023 250 Four-Stroke Motocross Shootout is the Yamaha YZ250F. On our dyno, it spins 39.5 horsepower and 18 pound-feet of torque, ranking it 5th in peak horsepower and ties with the Honda CRF250R for 6th in maximum torque. Although not a top performer on the dyno, the Yamaha engine is outstanding on the track. Bottom end power is strongest in the class, mid-range is equally impressive, and it pulls far enough in the RPM range for all but the most aggressive riders. This is the only 250 four-stroke motocrosser that can sometimes carry third gear in tighter corners when all others need to be ridden in second. The cable clutch works well, but requires some adjustment from cold to hot. Once again, the YZ250F features the best EFI tuning capability thanks to its compatibility with Yamaha's free Power Tuner app. Equipped with a KYB SSS 48mm coil spring fork and KYB shock, Yamaha continues to have the best suspension in the class. Action is consistent and progressive throughout the stroke. These KYB components are plenty tunable, but not many adjustments are required with such great base settings. Weighing in at 235 pounds wet on the Dirt Rider scales, the Yamaha falls right in the middle between the lightest and heaviest bikes in this comparison. It's not the most agile and takes a little extra effort to maneuver, but corners well once the turn is initiated. The YZ250F continues to be the most stable bike as well. Ergonomics leaves something to be desired with a wider radiator shroud area in midsection and a low seat that is thin on foam and pocketed in the middle. To make the YZ250F an even more well-rounded package, it could use more horsepower and torque above 6,000 RPM, a hydraulic clutch, and better ergonomics. So that wraps up Dirt Rider's 2023 250 Four-Stroke Motocross Shootout with the Yamaha YZ250F taking its 3rd consecutive win. With 2 bikes in the class likely to receive complete overhauls next year, we're already looking forward to another stacked comparison test in 2024. Thank you all for tuning in. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.